The sun rose gently over Rome, casting a golden light across St. Peter's Square. People from all corners of the world had gathered, some wrapped in flags, others clutching rosaries, their eyes fixed on the Vatican. The air buzzed with anticipation. This was no ordinary morning. Today the world would meet the new leader of the Catholic Church. The white smoke had already billowed from the chimney of the Sistine Chapel. The words, "Habemus Papam," had been whispered and echoed across the square like waves crashing onto a shore. But who would step onto that balcony? Who would be the voice, the guide, the shepherd of over 1 billion souls? Then came the announcement that would shake the world. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, the Archbishop of Manila, was the chosen one. A collective gasp traveled across the square. It wasn't just shock. It was awe. A Filipino pope, a pope from the Far East, a man of deep humility and spiritual strength. The cheers began softly and grew louder, a powerful mix of joy and disbelief. Flags waved high. People wept openly. This was history. This was hope. As the crowd settled, their eyes turned upward toward the balcony. Silence fell like a sacred blanket. And then he appeared. Pope Luis Antonio Tagle, calm, humble. Dressed in white, he stepped forward with gentle resolve. His gaze swept over the ocean of faces below, young and old, rich and poor, from every continent. Each person was searching his face for a sign, a word, something to hold on to. And then he spoke. His voice, though soft, carried across the square with clarity and warmth. "My brothers and sisters," he began, "I stand before you with a heart filled with humility and gratitude." These words were not rehearsed performances. They came from a soul deeply aware of the task he had just accepted. In flawless Italian, he spoke not with grand gestures or polished rhetoric, but with a quiet sincerity that touched every heart listening. He made no effort to impress. Instead, he chose to connect. He spoke of unworthiness, of grace, of being called to serve, not to be served. In that moment, the world saw not a man claiming power, but a servant stepping forward to carry a cross. Around the world, people watched. In the Philippines, Tagle's homeland, the celebration was electric. Church bells rang. People hugged in the streets. Many dropped to their knees, weeping. They were proud, their son, their bishop, now the Pope. In Europe, cathedrals echoed with solemn prayers and joyful praise. In villages in Africa and South America, radios crackled with the news. In bustling cities like New York and Tokyo, televisions displayed the same image. A gentle man, smiling humbly, speaking of unity, service, and compassion. Pope Tagle's message didn't stay confined to the Vatican walls. It soared across borders and languages. Headlines around the globe spoke of a new beginning. Commentators called him the People's Pope. He was praised for his warmth, his intellect, but most of all, for his humility. The world, wounded and weary, hungry for kindness, found comfort in his presence. And for a moment, despite the divisions of politics, religion, and race, people stood together, united by a feeling of peace. But who is Pope Tagle? His journey to this moment is as remarkable as the moment itself. Born in Manila in the Philippines, he was raised in a deeply Catholic home where faith wasn't just practiced, but lived. His parents weren't rich, but they were rich in compassion, in service, in love. They taught him early that being Catholic meant more than going to Mass. It meant serving the poor, feeding the hungry, defending the voiceless. Tagle excelled in school, but he never saw knowledge as a prize. He saw it as a tool to help others. He pursued theology with passion and earned a doctorate, diving deep into the teachings of the Church and the mystery of God. But even as his mind soared, his feet remained planted firmly on the ground. He could debate scholars, but he was just as comfortable sitting beside the sick, sharing a meal with the homeless, or playing with children in the streets of Manila. He made faith feel real, accessible, and alive. When he became Archbishop of Manila, Tagle didn't hide in palaces or behind marble walls. He walked the streets. He served food in soup kitchens. He built shelters for the homeless. He started educational programs for children who had nothing. He comforted victims of typhoons and floods. He cried with the grieving and prayed with the forgotten. He didn't just preach the gospel. He lived it. His sermons were never filled with high words or abstract theology. Instead, he spoke in simple language, often with humor, and always from the heart. People listened, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. His message was always clear: God is love, and that love must be lived in action. He often said, "Faith without compassion is empty." Beyond his own country, Cardinal Tagle became a global voice. He spoke out against corruption, poverty, human trafficking, and environmental destruction. He traveled to countries in crisis and stood with people of all faiths. He believed that interfaith dialogue wasn't just a theory, but a necessity. In his view, the church was not a fortress to hide in, but a home with open doors for all. So when he became pope, it wasn't just the Filipinos who celebrated. It was the poor, the marginalized, the voiceless. They saw in him not just a religious leader, but a friend, a father, a shepherd who walked with them. His first address as pope was a continuation of that same spirit. Standing on that historic balcony, Pope Tagle didn't call for glory. He called for healing. He didn't speak about rules. He spoke about love. He called on people everywhere to build bridges, not walls, to forgive, to serve, to live with compassion. We must be instruments of God's mercy, he said. And you could feel the world listening, not just with their ears, but with their hearts. His voice trembled with emotion at times, not from nervousness, but from the depth of his empathy. He spoke to everyone, the rich and the poor, the believer and the doubter, the young and the old. He asked all of us to remember the suffering, to care for the forgotten, to act with kindness in every interaction. No one should be left behind, he pleaded. These were not words for one religion, but for all of humanity. He reminded the church of its true mission, to be a light in darkness, a hand for the fallen, a voice for the voiceless. He called for a new focus, not on rituals but on relationships, not on power but on purpose. He urged people to reach out to strangers, to clothe the naked, to feed the hungry, to love without conditions. And something began to stir. People felt it, in their hearts, a desire to do more, to be more, to return to the roots of their faith, not in fear, but in love. Pope Tagle's message resonated because it was real, it was raw, it was human. It wasn't distant or cold, it was close. Like a friend holding your hand and saying, "You matter, we all matter." This wasn't just the beginning of a new papacy, it was the start of a new chapter for the Catholic Church, one that looked less like a palace and more like a home, one that listened more than it lectured, one that healed instead of hiding. The world didn't just see a pope that day, it saw a new possibility, a hope. A leader who could bring people together, not just within the church, but beyond it. A man who knew the power of love and the pain of the world, and who chose to respond not with judgment, but with grace. Could Pope Tagle's leadership truly reshape the church? Only time will tell. But on that day, in that moment, as he stood before the world, the answer seemed clear. Yes. Because the world didn't just hear his words, it felt them. They were words that called for action, for mercy, for humility. Words that reminded us all of what truly matters. Not status, not power, but love. Simple, powerful, sacrificial love. Pope Tagle closed his speech not with fanfare, but with a prayer that God would guide him, a prayer that the people would walk with him. And in response, the people clapped, cried, and prayed too. Because deep down, in every heart that listened that day, there was a stirring. A feeling that maybe, just maybe, something had changed, that maybe the world wasn't too far gone, that maybe this gentle man from Manila was the answer to a prayer they hadn't yet spoken aloud.